Good evening, Facebook friends and revolutionaries, citizens of America and the planet. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and thank you for all that you're doing to stand up and to stand tall and stand together, because we've got a crisis on our hands in so many ways. We have a crisis, but we are standing up like the world hasn't seen in generations. And we're calling for an America and a world that works for all of us. Thank you for joining this Fireside Chat. We'll be taking your questions, your comments, your thoughts. So please like, share, and send us your comments for us to share with others. As you know, there's kind of an emergency going on out there. There's really an all-out assault going on working people, on immigrants and women, on the LGBTQ community, on indigenous nations, on people of color, an assault on human rights and healthcare, democracy, the planet, and peace. But we are standing up like people haven't done in a very long time. And that assault is taking place, as we know, with this new cabinet of billionaires and bankers. And we'll be talking about the new appointees that have just been confirmed by the Senate momentarily. It's not only the cabinet members, many of whom are dedicated to actually destroying the cabinet divisions that they've been appointed to. It's also the executive actions that have taken place over the last 2 weeks, including an assault on the climate with the revival of the pipelines, including the Dakota Access Pipeline, which, as we understand, just an hour or so ago, work began again on that pipeline, and we'll be discussing what you can do about it. That's one area. It's the revival of the KXL pipeline, which was put to bed, but which the Trump administration has essentially revived. It is the assault through these executive actions on the rights of immigrants, on the calling for the wall and the construction of a wall, which is incredibly expensive, counterproductive, and actually a very harmful thing to do. And also the call to block immigrants from 7 nations and refugees from anywhere from coming to this country, a temporary halt. And thanks in part to the incredible vibrant resistance out there on the streets, the courts have been emboldened and have basically put this on hold. And the Trump administration is trying to undo that hold and block refugees again, but so far so good. There've been a number of hearings, and so far that block stopping the ban and permitting refugees who've been inordinately vetted for years worth of vetting, that flow of refugees is still continuing. And again, these are very carefully vetted refugees, largely families and people who have worked with the United States, many of whom are fleeing for their lives. Thanks to your principled resistance, that flow of refugees is continuing. There's also been an onslaught from these executive orders on regulations, not only environmental regulations, but also regulations to protect our economy, to prevent the big banks from crashing the economy again. The protections that were created after the crash of 2008, the regulations that were incorporated into the Dodd-Frank Act, which, yes, is complicated and ought to be streamlined and should be more efficient and more effective, but it is holding the fort in some important ways. So in striking that down, basically, Donald Trump is reviving, if you can believe this, allowing financial advisors to secretly serve their own financial interests, not yours, not the client's interests. They can be basically screwing the climate in order, the client, in order to line their own pocketbook, basically. It's absolutely outrageous what's going on here. And then I think maybe most worrisome of all is the elevation of Stephen Bannon, a racist white supremacist with no experience in basically in public policy and in international relations or in security, has been elevated to the inner circle of the National Security Council. And in fact, he has displaced the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Not that I personally see eye to eye with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but at least we have some reality testing there, and some due consideration based on some reality checks, which unfortunately Steve Bannon doesn't have whatsoever. And under the operation of this new Security Council, this raid was approved on Yemen last week that resulted in reportedly as many as dozens of civilian deaths. So that was absolutely catastrophic. It also led to the death of one of these SEALs, these Navy SEALs, who was part of the operation. It was by any measure an utter catastrophe and kind of a symbol of what foreign policy looks like under the new sort of shoot from the hip Trump administration that had decided to undertake this special ops operation over a casual dinner. So, you can see the kind of process that goes into this. So, that was another really alarming development. And most recently, we know that Betsy DeVos was approved by the Senate. When was it? In the wee hours of the morning. And then more recently, Jeff Sessions was approved, which is, awful, and adds to a long list. I think that's like 8 or 9 approvals of Trump's cabinet of billionaires and bankers. Thanks to the action of thousands of people who've gone out and gotten onto the streets, finally the Democrats began really engaging in the Senate, and that was definitely good to see. At long last, and thanks to everyone out in the street. There were thousands of people who actually went to Chuck Schumer's home and called on him to start standing up and to get a spine and start resisting. And finally, that began to happen. So it was a real achievement that the Democrats unanimously voted against Jeff Sessions, I believe, for the first time, and actually I don't know that vote confirmed yet, but on the DeVos nomination, I think it was unanimous. So there was a tweet that went out that was not reviewed by me or approved, that was a little bit confused about that. It was kind of a non sequitur of a tweet. But, the reality is, yes, this is a good thing that the Democrats did mobilize. However, it's important to remember that the crisis in education didn't just start with the Republicans. In fact, it was the education secretary of Barack Obama. It was Rahm Emanuel in Chicago. It was Arne Duncan in the White House leading the charge on our schools. 300,000 school teachers and public school employees were laid off thanks to the Democratic policy, of which Betsy DeVos is really an extension. She's even worse, but it's not like this is substantively new. There were thousands of schools, largely in communities of color, that were shut down under the Obama administration, which really began to turn the crank for charter schools, which is exactly what's wrong with Betsy DeVos. She's really that policy now on steroids. So this has been a bipartisan crisis brought to us by Democrats and Republicans, which we're now seeing on steroids under the Trump administration, but a little bit less of a lethal policy on school or climate or healthcare. Slightly less lethal is not okay. We need a new way forward that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. And thanks to all of you out there for being the resistance. We are fighting back, and we are just now finding our strength. Remember, under Richard Nixon, one of the worst, most corrupt, most oppressive presidents in our history, we got the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, we brought the troops home from Vietnam, we got women's right to choose from a very conservative Supreme Court, we got OSHA protecting workers' health and safety in the workplace. So when we stand up, there's nothing that we can't do. And we're seeing right now, in fact, the incredible rally of the Department of Justice, starting with Sally Yates, the interim Attorney General, who quit in order to say no to Trump's immigrant ban. So good things are happening. Let's keep it happening. Let's keep up the struggle. Before I go to your comments and your questions, I want to mention two other really important achievements in the struggle. And also, so that I don't forget, I want to mention about DAPL. As noted earlier, the assault is taking place on the Standing Rock, Sioux, indigenous people, and all the other hundreds of tribes represented by that struggle. And there are two websites where you can go to get the latest. It's my impression that Chase Ironsides, one of the leaders of Standing Rock, has called for able-bodied people to come and help with the resistance, to help stand their ground, and to help, continue to challenge in the court of law, and to help challenge with peaceful civil disobedience, standing up for human rights, indigenous rights, and for the water supply we all depend on and the climate we all depend on. Don't take my word for it, because this is a rapidly changing situation. I urge you to go to two websites. One is the Facebook page of Chase Ironsides, who is there right now at the camp, which I believe was going to try to stand their ground with peaceful civil disobedience, making the claim that this land belongs to them. It was unjustly taken from them in the late 1800s when their treaty was violated by the U.S. military, I believe, at that time. So they are standing their ground, last I heard. If you go to Last Real Indian on Facebook, you'll get the latest update and any call to action from Chase Iron Eyes. And you can also go to the sacredstonecamp.org as a website. That's sacredstonecamp.org to get the latest update on Standing Rock. Two final things to mention. We're fighting out there in the streets, on campuses. Students are walking out in protest. Actually, I think it was a Betsy DeVos. There was a major walkout. We're standing up in all kinds of ways. The city of Seattle just voted to divest from Wells Fargo Bank in support of the resistance to the Dakota Access Pipeline, since Wells Fargo is one of the banks that enables the Dakota Access Pipeline to move forward. So there's all kinds of acts of principled resistance taking place right now, which is so uplifting and elevating. But we have to bring that resistance also into the halls of power, so that instead of reacting against the misdeeds and the predatory actions of our political parties, the two major parties funded by the big banks and the fossil fuel giants and the war profiteers. Instead, we need to be in the halls of power, actually setting the agenda for people, planet, and peace over profit. We have two wonderful candidates right now running in these elections that were just like made in heaven. It's like manna from heaven here, having these special elections sort of appear almost out of nowhere. One of them is my running mate from 2012, Sherry Honkala, who is just an exemplary human rights advocate standing up for economic human rights, for working people and poor people and communities of color. She is running for state representative in a race that was launched because the Democratic state rep just pled guilty to felony fraud charges in some kind of a scandal that involves a lot of other Democrats as well. So she's the second person in that seat to basically be removed on account of fraud. And because of all the conflict going on inside of the Democratic Party right now, inside of Philadelphia, where basically Republicans don't exist as a political entity. So a lot of support is coming her way. She actually has the potential to break through and get into the halls of power so we can start making policy instead of just reacting to it. Sherry's website, you can volunteer. If you're not in the district, you can help with phone banking to get the word out. You can make a contribution. Go to Sherry197.com. That's Sherry197.com and support her campaign. Kenneth Mejia is running for Congress in Los Angeles in another seat that was opened up, that was vacated. There are many Democrats that are going to be running in the same primary because of the way they run primaries in California. So many Democrats are going to be splitting the Democratic vote, and he's going to be running as the only Green with the potential to really emerge out of this primary. So these are two potentially breakthrough elections. His website is Mejia, M-E-J-I-A, and that's the number for Congress, MejiaForCongress.com. So please join them, support them, phone bank for them, and throw something into the hat, whatever you can do. So now I am going to turn to your questions and your comments and your thoughts here, if I can bring it up on my screen. Okay. Michael Byram says, what's your statement about Sessions and DeVos? This is a tragedy, and this is, this is what we have come to under Donald Trump. But remember, where did Donald Trump come from? People who voted for Donald Trump were not voting for him so much as they were voting against the Democrats and their legacy of NAFTA and Wall Street bailouts and Wall Street deregulation that crashed the economy in the first place. So my statement is that we must resist this bipartisan catastrophe that has given us the likes of Sessions and DeVos. Yes, I encourage the Democrats to stand up against them, but we have to do more than stand up against them. We need to move forward with a real agenda for people, planet, and peace over profit. That means we need real international security. We need security here at home. We need a right to a job. We need living wages with a national living wage standard. We need a Green New Deal to eliminate fossil fuels by 2030 and to create a massive emergency jobs program in order to get there. So this is where we differ from the Democrats. I say, do what you can, Democrats. Better late than never. But we need to be liberated from the constraints of a corporate-funded party. Ron Sizzler says, how should the nation strike stop work till changes are made. I'd say stay tuned, Ron. I think that's a really exciting idea, which we're beginning to hear about, this idea of a general strike. And, you know, we're seeing bits of this here and there. So is there the potential for us to kind of collaborate in these actions with perhaps a day, perhaps 2 days, perhaps a week, to bring these wheels of destruction grinding to a halt? This concept of a general strike to take back our democracy. I'd say also stay tuned, because Donald Trump is kind of finding his way into a constitutional crisis right now with this war with the judiciary that he seems to be in. So stay tuned. There's a very exciting resistance here happening from many quarters. Sarah Cecilia says, "Hi, Jill. Thank you for speaking to us all. I've had a really bad day, and it makes me happy to hear the truth spoken." Thank you, Sarah. It makes me really happy to hear the truth from you as well. Thank you. Let's keep getting the truth out there, and let's keep fighting for the truth. Don Estrada says, "Hi, Jill. I'm wanting to run for the Congressional District 53 in San Diego. I'm running green. Any tips?" That's really exciting, Don. I would like you to tune in to the seminars that are being run now. And I believe there are monthly seminars. And if you go to the Candidate Coordinating Committee, I believe it is called, of the Green Party, the National Green Party, they have been running seminars for prospective candidates to begin pulling your team together. Keep us posted if you're in San Diego. We're actually going to be out there in March. So get in touch with your local Green Party. We will be in San Diego itself and in many of the major metropolitan areas throughout California. So come on down and join the team. And I would love to help be a part of helping you and so many potential candidates out there actually stand up for the transformative change that we need. One piece of advice is, this is the Hail Mary moment. We really need to stand up, not for the tweaks around the margins, but for the real substantive change that we need. Check out our agenda on my campaign website. This was the agenda that Ajamu, Baraka, and I ran on, and it translates into local agendas, but for people running for Congress, it's really ready-made to a national agenda as well. So please check it out and keep up the good work. And Miranda Johnson also echoes the thoughts about setting up a general strike. Stay tuned, Miranda. Maybe we'll do a Facebook Live particularly about that, because there are ways that we can prepare. When you begin to think about a strike, you want to have strike support, especially for the workers who won't be going to work, and that could be a whole lot of people. So you want to start thinking about how to do that strike support. What's your food source going to be? How are you going to keep money in the pockets of people who need to keep getting food on the table? How do you save up and prepare for a general strike? Things of that nature. It's also not too soon to be doing training in nonviolent civil disobedience, because odds are we're going to need plenty of that before we're done as well. And you should be able to find out more about that from your local Green parties. Jeremy Kaufeld says, any concerns about the apparent escalation towards war with Iran? Absolutely, Jeremy. And we're seeing this, particularly from the Republicans. We've seen escalation towards war with Russia from the Democrats. I think escalation towards war is a really bad thing and something that we don't need right now. Internationally, there are laws against starting wars unless you are under threat of imminent attack. We are not under threat of imminent attack. There's absolutely no excuse for resorting to war right now. We need to stand up and be clear what the consequence of the last, 15 years of war has been. Since 2001, 2002, these wars in, the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, and then Libya, and on. We've spent trillions of dollars. 1 million people have been killed in Iraq alone. Tens of thousands of U.S. soldiers have been killed or maimed. And what do we have to show for it? Unstable states, failed states, basically, incredible mass refugee migrations, and worse terrorist threats. They're not getting better, they're getting worse. The alternative to war is basically a peace offensive, and that's what we need more of. Thank you for asking that important question. Emma Fiala says, we need more cities to divest. Continue divesting on a personal level, but we need to pressure our cities, universities, etc., to divest from fossil fuel investments, weapon manufacturing, investments, etc., and big banks supporting these things. Wonderful, Emma. I couldn't believe more. Agree more. And Emma provides a website, www.divestyourcity.org. That's divestyourcity.org. That sounds terrific and a great thing to look into. And specifically for starting a local bank, there are many cities now that are beginning to officially look into and to establish committees, basically, to look into what would it take to start a local bank, which basically then undercuts as much as 50% the cost of doing all these things that we want to be able to do. So be sure to check out the Public Bank Institute as well. You can Google that. Daniel Goheen says, let's build the Green Party from the bottom up. Thank you, Daniel. Luann Davis Inn says, what are we doing to reform elections and how can we help? We need open debates and public funding of elections. I couldn't agree more. We have a legal case that actually the Green Party is a plaintiff in, and it's called Level the Field, and it just won a victory against the Commission on Presidential Debates. So there is a real possibility that we might, in fact, have a very different situation going forward. And again, I would urge you to tune into my website, Jill2016.com. Get on the email list because we will be keeping you posted on some of these very exciting developments. There will be a conference in Pennsylvania in follow-up to our recount effort, and that fight is still very much alive in the 3 states where the recounts happen. It has now become a fight for legislative change in order to get rid of these easily hackable, easily corruptible voting machines, which on which no daylight can shine because they are untransparent and they are unaccountable. So it's the voting machines, but it's also how they're used in this Jim Crow voting system where they are most likely to fail in low-income communities of color. We're also working with other reformers here like Greg Palast, who has a terrific movie out. You can go to his website and his Facebook page, actually. I think you can see his movie for free called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, where he shares his research, his investigative reporting about the Jim Crow system that is alive and well in our voting system, even before you get to the polls, in the way that voter ID laws work and in the way that this interstate cross-check system works. So there's lots of exciting action going on right now, and I'm hoping Greg will be at our conference in Philadelphia in March, and I don't have that date offhand, but if you go to our website, you can check on the postings there and sign up for our newsletter. So let me just take a few final questions and comments here. Jules Holt says, what else can we do for our voices and concerns to be heard? I'd say check out your local Green Party, check out your local candidates, support Sherry Honkala, and support Kenneth Mejia, two candidates running in special elections at a time when there are virtually no other elections going on. So by supporting them nationwide, by helping to phone bank for them, we can help push them over the top and actually break this glass ceiling, this green ceiling, and get into the halls of power and open it up to we the people for a change instead of just the 1%. And let's see, I'm going to take one last one here. How can we get people to move through this fear phase and get active? Marches, phone banking, postcards, all of the above. Yes, I mean, the only thing we have to fear right now is fear itself. The most dangerous thing we can do now is be quiet and let this crisis go unopposed. Remember, when we stand up, we have the power that we need, we have the numbers that we need, and we have the vision and the ingenuity and the inspiration that we need to make this happen. Remember, Donald Trump is in an increasingly vulnerable situation right now. He has enormous conflicts of interests. He may be in violation of the Constitution just because of his investments that he refuses to give up. He's losing public support because so many working people who voted for him are discovering, in fact, that he's not on their side. He's not on our side. He's on the side of the billionaires. He was railing against Wall Street, but he's already appointed like 6 people from Goldman Sachs into his inner circle, including Steve Bannon, that he has basically just put into the inner circle, not only his own inner circle, but the inner circle for those of us, that decides the security, the national security for all of us. So I really encourage you, don't let them intimidate you into harming yourself. We have enormous power now by standing up. Donald Trump's numbers are declining. Even the Republicans are alarmed at what he's doing in foreign policy and national security. Even his nominee for the Supreme Court registered his alarm at Donald Trump's statements in opposition to the judges that are weighing in on his immigration ban. His immigrant ban is in courts, and Donald Trump is putting out some very nasty tweets against them. If he was an ordinary person who had a case being heard and he was tweeting nasty things about the judge, some legal experts say that he would be held in contempt of court right now. So this guy's doing really crazy things. He is a danger, even as the head of a corporation, let alone as the head of a nation. So, when it seems really, really, really too crazy to be true, it may in fact come to pass that this guy just cannot maintain his hold on power. Stay tuned, stay active, let's stand up, and let's insist on the future that we deserve. And again, taking our inspiration from our brothers and sisters at Standing Rock who go forward peacefully, who go forward with love, with community. I think we could have no better example as we face the emergency at Standing Rock and we face the emergency out there in all of our lives, in all of our communities, here across America and throughout the world. Donald Trump, is part of a very large phenomenon right now, this right-wing extremism which is taking hold in response to the neoliberalism of the Democrats as well. So, this is a bipartisan crisis. It needs a transformative solution, not around the margins. This is about creating a very different system that puts people, planet, and peace over profit, that creates an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts an end to the lesser evil and moves fast forward for the greater good. So I thank you all for being that greater good, for tuning in here to the Green News Network, and I look forward to seeing you out in the street, and I look forward to seeing you out there supporting Sherry Honkala and Kenneth Mejia so we can break open the floodgates for a political transformation as well as a social, economic, and ecological transformation that we deserve. Thank you all so much for your good work. And I'll see you again here on the Green News Network. Take care. Bye-bye.